is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
We're barely bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. I'm Tucker Franklin, hanging out with Matt Lane and Matt Miller. We are continuing our college football previews here on Barely Bowl Eligible. There's a lot of news in the college football world, so we had to go to the Pac-12. We had to go out west. And before we get into it, Matty, how are you doing today?
Listen, we had to get to the Pac-12 before there was no more Pac-12 to do. I mean, we had to jump on the iron while it was hot here because one, I'm excited for college football season. We're in the middle of the Chiefs training camp right now, so we're all excited about that. College football's close. Like, I'm having a good time right now. Matt, how's everything going for you right now? I'm sure things are starting to ramp up and get a lot busier for you.
Yeah, things are definitely starting to ramp up. Trying to get familiar with, like 1,200 college football players so that I can start narrowing my list down and figuring out who to watch. But I am glad we're doing the Pac-12 while that conference still technically exists. But I think it's kind of unfortunate. The Pac-12 has it feels like a sure thing as the number one overall pick in the 2024 draft with Caleb Williams, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner at USC. But all the talk is about who's leaving the conference. It's not about, oh my God, we have this transcendent quarterback prospect, not to mention a couple other pretty good quarterback prospects and Michael Penix and Bo Nix and Cam Ward. And like, there's some good quarterback play out there. So it's unfortunate that all the talk right now is about who's leaving the conference, not who's actually playing in it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation going down in the Pac-12. And just a year ago, it seemed like the Pac-12 was in a pretty solid position, and the Big 12 was in that depleting situation. But they've the roles have been reversed as Colorado, if you don't know already, has decided to join the Pac-12 in 2024. They are going to go to the Big 12. USC, UCLA are going to the Big 10. And look, there's another team rumored to go to the Big 12. It hasn't been announced yet. I know the Big 12 said, or there's been reports saying that there's another mystery team in the mix. I don't know if it's from the Pac-12. They didn't say what conference it was from, but it's going to be really interesting. Conference realignment is so exciting, so fun. But Matt, I want to get your thoughts on this. Colorado going back home. I've seen some takes on Twitter of like, oh, Colorado's now limping back to the Big 12. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but what do you think about Colorado to the Big 12?
I am such a geography nerd that I'm happy just from that. And we talked about this when we did the Big 12 preview, like BYU to Central Florida. Like, what are we doing here, guys? So this one makes more sense to me. Hot take: Mizzou should also get in the Big 12. It just makes sense from a geography standpoint, but I'll digress at that. I think it's good for Colorado. When USC and UCLA leave, what's left there. I think it's a matter of time before we see Oregon and Washington flirting with another conference as well. And with Dion there, with them actually selling out games at this point, it makes sense to try to strike while the iron's hot, as Maddie said a little bit. I don't think Colorado's going to be any good at all this year. So it's also like, go ahead and get that invite while you can, because I don't know that the product on the field is going to match the hype we're seeing off the field right now. I think it's a matter of time before that happens, but good for the Buffs getting back to the Big 12. I grew up, I'm a product of the old, Big 8 in the Southwest Conference. I am that old. Yes. So it's nice to see people going home now.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense for Colorado, right? Like I don't want to say they always felt entirely out of place in the Pac-12, but it didn't ever make like a lot of sense. I know they originally kind of went out there to get a better foothold into like California and the Northwest for recruiting because they weren't winning any of the battles in the Midwest or down into Texas and stuff. With NIL and then two with Deion Sanders, who has connections to Texas and everything, like moving back just gets them a little bit closer probably to where they want to recruit, at least in the short term. It puts them in a much more stable conference. I mean, like, I think it's what their media rights shares, like guaranteed now at like $31 million per year based on the TV stuff. And the Pac-12 is just kind of still sitting on their hands, not really sure what they're going to be able to pay everybody. And San Diego State's flirting with entering the Pac-12, but then maybe not. Like they're in such a weird spot. So Colorado gets stability. They get to another very competitive conference where I think they just make a little bit more sense. So yeah, I think it's a good move for the Big 12. It's a good move for Colorado. And I think this is the writing on the wall for the Pac-12. This is a Power 5 team, like jumping ship. I know Texas and Oklahoma are just kind of doing it, but that's at least to the SEC. Like that's a clear step kind of up. Going from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 is technically a lateral move, but like you're a Power 5 team leaving a conference after 2 more just in the previous season. Like, I don't know, you're in a pickle if you're the Pac-12.
Well, that's what I kind of want to talk about next is like how much longer does the Pac-12 have? I mean, you talk about the media rights deal. That's the toughest part of all of this is the whole time they've been it's been a very odd posturing by the Pac-12 saying like, oh, we've got a deal, but we're not going to announce it yet. We're working on this, but we're not going to announce anything yet. And they just seem to be losing teams left and right, and talking about teams like San Diego State wanting to go there. I think I saw something about like SMU should go to the Pac-12. Like they're going to be taking all these like American teams out here, but I don't know if they're going to have like come 2024. What are they going to have 8 teams? It seems like right now. I mean, there's probably more rumored moves out there as we've talked about. Mentioned to you guys. I saw Brutus the Buckeye on his Instagram posted a picture with the Oregon Duck and said like big things coming. It's like everyone's hinting at like everyone else leaving. Matt, what do you think is like is it past 2024? Does the Pac-12 exist? I guess is what I should ask you.
Man, I don't know how they can. And like you said, there's the media rights deal, which, you know, the place I work is involved in that. I don't know anything about it. That doesn't trickle down to those of us who cover the NFL draft. There's people who make those decisions. I'm not one of them. But I just don't know, like, if you don't have a media deal right now, how could you get one? When there's rumors of, you've already lost USC and UCLA, second biggest TV market in the country. Also, you know, blue bloods historically within your conference, and now you're rumored to lose Oregon and Washington. Colorado is not good, but they have Deion Sanders, who is a gigantic celebrity in your sport. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to like Washington State, Oregon State, Utah. They're good programs, they produce good players, but those are small market teams. Mm-hmm. They're not bringing in the eyes, you know, like we did the Big 12 last week. And when they started adding, you know, like Houston, it's like, that's a huge TV market that you're adding. So if you're the Pac-12, what market is out there for you to tap into? Arizona and Arizona State aren't keeping this conference alive. I'm sorry. It's just not going to work like that. So I don't know who you would try to entice to get in there, especially anyone west of the Rockies. It's going to get pretty tough to find a team.
Well, and I think that's the trickle, like the hard part they get to, I guess, is the TV right deals, the space, the slots that are left in your main TV partnerships. They don't have enough for a 12-team, 14-team league. And so the Pac-12 getting down smaller, I guess it might somehow help them out. But if you're CBS, ESPN, you know, these big TV packages looking for stuff, why not just have the Big 12 add 2 more teams? And that way you're only filling in 2 slots instead of 12 slots and getting the Colorados or the Stanfords and the Arizona States on TV. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know. I don't think they have a spot. Like, I just don't think they have a spot right now. There's going to be a mad scramble, I think, to get Oregon and Washington together. That makes the most sense to go to the Big 10, I think, get another chunk of teams out on the West Coast. But like, that's the last that the Pac-12 has, are those 2 Northwest schools. I've heard a little bit of a rumor that Arizona, a lot of like fans from Arizona want them or think that they might be going to the Big 12 too. Like they think they might be the surprise team would be Arizona to the Big 12. I think that kind of works for the Big 12's desire to be a basketball conference as well. So like, that's just another one that's going out there right now. Too many rumors. There's just too much smoke to believe the Pac-12 is making it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Does Arizona leave without Arizona State, Maddie? Do you think they'd do that?
Yeah, I think they would. I don't think you have to put those 2 together. I think it would be helpful. The problem is just like, how many teams does the Big 12 honestly want to take on, right? Like if they don't, I think I heard that Brett Yormark wants to be around 14 teams. They'll be back to 12 next year without OU and Texas. Colorado makes it 13. I mean, you know what I mean? So like, I don't know where they're going to go with it. I don't know if they could have space for Arizona and Arizona State.
That makes sense. Don't really want an odd number there. It makes things a lot more difficult. But I guess let's talk about what's going on the field this season for the Pac-12, because it's a very interesting conference. Matt, as you mentioned, lots of quarterbacks in this conference and lots of very good quarterbacks. And I think Maddie and I even talked about last year, you know, a lot of the quarterbacks are the same from last year. Like this was a sneaky good, like offensive of conference. If you wanted to watch some offensive football, you watch the Pac-12, and they just had their media day recently. So they had, with the media day comes out the preseason poll. Probably no surprise to anybody that USC was the top spot. They did 25 first place votes, followed by Washington, Utah, Oregon, Oregon State, UCLA coming in at 6, Washington State at 7, Arizona at 8, Cal at 9, 10 Arizona State, 11 Colorado, which could be a surprise to some people, and 12 Stanford, and we were kind of talking. There's a clear line, I think, when you look at the teams in this conference that are that could compete for the title, and then teams that you don't really think that will be up there for the title, if I can say that politically correct.
That was very nice of you.
Yeah. There's a clear line. But let's start with Matt. What do you think of the strength of this conference?
I mean, I think it's the quarterbacks. It definitely is. You're right. There's a Mendoza line as far as teams go in this conference. It's like there's probably 6 teams that you're like, you know what? I will carve out time in my schedule to watch them play. And then there's 6 teams where you're like, you know, is Gunsmoke on? Like, can I watch something else? Like, what are we doing here? So I do think you've got some haves and have-nots, but even those have-nots the quarterback play in this conference is so good. I mean, it's not just Caleb Williams. It's Michael Penix, who, you know, a dynamic lefty who's had some injury issues, but his play last year, you watch him and you're like, gosh, dang, this dude has some first-round qualities and some first-round moments. It's just, can he overcome that injury bug and that label of injury prone? You know, we Bo Nix. Bo Nix was a punchline when he was at Auburn, and he goes to Oregon and becomes, I mean, there's, you know, round 2, round 3 talk on Bo Nix as a quarterback prospect. So, and that's not to mention the Cams, you know, who are both really talented guys as well. I mean, it's a fun conference. So if you want to watch quarterback play, I know we did the Big 12 and I was like, man, this is an offensive line conference this year. Pac-12 is a quarterback conference once again. And this is, you know, there could be 6 quarterbacks drafted out of this conference. So it's definitely one you got to keep an eye on. Not for you Chiefs fans, because you guys suck and you have Patrick Mahomes. But for everybody else, you want to watch this conference.
Listen, when we're sitting there in like round 6 and, you know, DJU has transferred to Oregon State and, you know, Muddle's around there, we can just snag him in round 6, be a backup. No. The quarterbacks in this conference are insane. I mean, like I just said, DJU, who once upon a time was like everyone's the next guy there at Clemson right after Trevor Lawrence. And then, you know, whether it's the offensive system or whether he maybe wasn't ready for it, I guess we'll find out this year. But he's now in this conference that has already fixed to some degree and Michael Penix and Bo Nix. It's just, it's a lot of fun with the quarterbacks. I think the strength, I kind of see 2 things here. I agree. There's very much a hard line. I would even go as far to say, I think it's a 4-team conference. Like there's 4 teams that if you told me that USC, Washington, Utah, or Oregon win the conference and are going to the playoff, I'm not surprised. I'd be a little shocked if anybody besides those guys win the conference. I just do think that there's a talent disparity from those 4, I guess, to kind of the rest of it. But then, then it falls off pretty hard in the bottom 6 teams after that. So I'm going to say the coaching staffs, though. I really like the coaching staffs. And you have a lot of innovative coaching. Everybody knows Lincoln Riley at USC. I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff going on there. But then you get Kalen DeBoer there at Washington and what he was able to do last year. And then Oregon State, you know, up there in Corvallis always has their run game that they got working on, and now they're trying to incorporate a little bit more play action passing. You got you got Kenny Dillingham is moving around. Like you have all these guys that are now in this conference that I think are bringing new stuff, not new stuff to college football, but like just innovative stuff. They're doing fun things, and you're getting some of these coaching staffs coming up from the FCS or coordinators from other teams that are coming over. So I like to watch them. I like to see what they're doing, and it works out really well for me being on the East Coast because then like nothing's happening at like 11 p.m. when the Pac-12, you know, takes the TV. Like that's what I need the Pac-12 around for. I need those late night games when nothing else is happening. Kids are asleep. Wife doesn't really care that football's on the TV again. Cause like, I need that. I need to keep the Pac-12 after dark around as long as possible.
Yeah. Dan Lanning as well. What he's doing at Oregon, which he just got paid as well. But that's kind of a fun, like, you know, battle within the conference, is Whittingham at Utah and Lanning at Oregon. As long as we have a Pac-12, like watching them compete with Lincoln Riley is a really fun, like kind of nerd chess match of like, how are you guys going to kind of knock each other off? And like we saw last year, I'm dumb and said in August, I don't know if USC loses a game. And then people were like, what about Utah? I was like, shit. Yep. I forgot about Utah. And the Utes put that smack down. So it's as much fun as USC is. And as they're going to be on Sports Center every week, like Utah and Oregon and Washington are still really tough teams as well.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting guy. I was going to bring up Dan Lanning too, because that contract, I think it was like $45 million or something like that. With the numbers are insane from that. Yeah. $45 million extension, including a $20 million buyout. And by the way, buyouts are getting insane in college football now, just like as coach contracts in general, just like they're absolutely insane. But We got to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk about some of the dark horse teams in this conference. Kind of as we mentioned, it's a little bit of a hard line, but we'll talk about some teams that could be some dark horses coming up right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Welcome back into Barely Bowl Eligible here on KC Sports Network, a college football podcast here at KCSN. We're talking Pac-12. We're previewing the Pac-12, and we're going to talk about some dark horse teams here. Matt, I want to start with you because, Maddie brought this up with Oregon State and DJU. That's who you got as your dark horse. Sorry to spoil it, but that's who you got down as your dark horse team. But I just completely stole your thunder there. I saw
it's
it.
Okay.
Like, that's a good one.
No drum roll. It's good. Yeah.
So go ahead and go. Just talk about Oregon State, please.
So, shocker, my surprise team is Oregon State. It is a lot of DJU coming in. I remember watching this dude filling in for Trevor Lawrence, his true freshman season against Notre Dame, and he throws for like 450 yards. And you have this moment of like, oh man, he might be next. He might be the next guy. That did not happen at Clemson, like you said. Maybe it was the scheme. The offensive line play at Clemson is low key terrible, and I do think that has held him back some. But we'll get a chance to see now. Jonathan Smith, who an alum at Oregon State, he has that program pointing in the right direction, in my opinion. They're running that beautiful spread offense, and that's going to benefit what DJ does. It's a senior-laden team. They have a lot of experience, and as much as they do want to run the ball, I think they're going to put DJ in some better opportunities. I know he has said he has taken his health a little more seriously this year, is in better shape. Hopefully, also just getting on the West Coast is going to be beneficial for him. Things move a little bit slower out there than the lights and the pressure of Clemson, where you're replacing a legend in Trevor Lawrence. So I'm bullish on them. I don't think Oregon State's going to win the conference by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they will be, they're ranked 5th in the preseason polls. I wouldn't be shocked if they overperform because of the experience, but also I think we could see someone like DJU really boost his draft stock and not get back in the first round conversation like he was as a true freshman, but definitely get up in maybe that top 120 conversation.
Yeah, but I think Oregon State is probably like the most correct answer here when you get past like the teams at the top, those 4 teams at the top that are, a lot of people are kind of expecting to compete, because they're kind of like Utah, and that it's going to be an ugly game when you go up to play them. It's going to be physical. A lot of stuff's going to happen. And then if they get DJU to play at like a Cam Rising-esque level, which isn't a first-round quarterback, but a very good college quarterback, they become a dangerous team. So, yeah, I think that's a good one. I'm going with Washington State, and it's entirely on the back of Cam Ward making a jump in his second year at Washington State. And just, here's a guy that has all the physical I mean, he's not Caleb Williams, don't get me wrong, but he has a ton of physical tools. Like, he's closer to a Caleb Williams physically than he is some other quarterbacks that you're going to be, playing in college football. And so if he can make that jump mentally, he can get on the right page. He can get his consistency down. A guy with his athleticism and his arm talent really can be a huge weapon, especially in this conference where there is a lot of offense going on. Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator from Western Kentucky, is there with him for the second year. So I think that if he's ready to take that step and the team around him can be competent enough, maybe they catch lightning in a bottle and this team can just score enough points over and over again. I don't anticipate the defense being great. I do believe they lost, both their starting linebackers from last year. They're like highest linebackers with the most snaps played. They lost some guys on defense, but I do think that they can maybe do enough. And it's all the Cam Ward show. I think the entire wide receiver room's transfers this year. So, there's not a lot of continuity.
Right. Yep.
It's not a lot of continuity there, but I saw some of the throws he made against Oregon, and some of them, there were some bad throws in there too. Don't get me wrong. There was some head scratchers, but there's also some phenomenal plays. And I'm always going to be enticed by that. So give me Washington State as a sleeper team here, just because I do think there's a big gap between the top and the bottom. But Cam Ward's a type of player that I think can close that gap just based purely on his talent at the most important position.
I think we need to have a conversation about Colorado because they picked 11th in the preseason poll. Matt, you mentioned at the top that you don't think they're going to this isn't going to be the year that they take the big jump. A very bizarre, I don't know if bizarre is the right word, but a very interesting kind of start to the beginning of the Deion Sanders reign in Colorado and Boulder. A lot of transfers going out, a lot of transfers coming in. They're renovating basically that whole program. Picked 11th. I want to get your guys' thoughts on Colorado. Like we talked about them going to the Big 12, but like as a team this year, they've got some like very skilled players. But how do you think that translates? Matt, I want to start with you. But how do you think that translates onto the field this year?
I'm very, very excited to see some of those players. You know, like you said, I mean, what Dion say that he was bringing his baggage with him, and it was Louis or something like that. I mean, if you look at their depth chart, every player is a transfer player. I want to say, I don't have it in front of me. I believe they have 3 returning starters on the entire team. Like, I mean, I'm talking like offense. Wow. They have 3 returning starters. So it is like that could work. I don't know how much continuity, matters in college football. I like to think it does matter. Coaches think it matters. But I mean, you're going to rock with 19 new starters. We have no idea what to expect. And I know I was joking around. I was like, I don't think they're going to be very good. That's my whole basis that they're not going to be very good is how do you do that when you basically have like 20 players returning from last year's team? Now, you could say last year's team sucked. So it's probably a good thing that you're turning the roster over. But it's unprecedented what Dion is doing there. And I'll, be anxious to see if it works. But I mean, you got Travis Hunter, you got Shedeur Sanders. Those are big names and they're big time players at Jackson State. I want to see how well they play at the next level if they can continue to do some of the things they were doing there. Also, I want to see Travis Hunter. Is Travis Hunter going to play like Ironman football like I had to do in high school at a 1A in Missouri, where it's like, hey, bro, like you're on every special team, you're on offense, you're on defense. Hope you're in shape because we need you out there. But they're going to be fascinating to watch just from that standpoint of like, I mean, you're going to need to print the roster as a fan.
Yeah.
Who these people are. So it's going to be wild.
So I pulled up their depth chart while you were talking on our lads. And like, if people don't use it, transfer players are in like a goldish color instead of blue. There's a whole lot of gold on this, this page when you pull it up. I mean, they'll be fun. I think they'll be fun, right? I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know how good they'll be. I think they're going to get their ass kicked in the trenches. I think that's where you're a little scared if you're Colorado fans is when you go up against, I don't know if they play Utah this year or not, but like when you go up against some of the more physical teams, I don't know if they'll be able to hold up, but I do think their offensive weapons and then their skill players on the back end of the defense should be good. So like they have a chance in this conference to get into some games where their athleticism and some of just the playmakers they have can take over and at least bring you fun football. I just don't know how much that's going to translate to wins. I think it's the ultimate wild card. Is Shedeur Sanders gonna look as good as he did at Jackson? I thought he looked really good, especially when I watched him. I was like, oh, there's something here, but how does that translate at the next level? Same thing with, Travis and all these guys. Like, I'm curious to see. I think athletically they'll be okay. I'm just worried about the trenches as they take that first year step.
Yep.
I looked up because I wanted to know the number of transfers that they had, and according to this article from ESPN on May 5th, Colorado has had 71 players enter the transfer portal since last August.
I mean, how many did they bring in? Like that's the thing. I want to see like the net. How many did you lose versus how many did you bring in? Do they have? Like what? I mean,
transfers in 42 transfers in. And it looks like they had 70. They have 71 scholarship players out of 85. That was as of May, but they had 42 transfers in, and 71 entered the transfer portal as of last August. Like
that's still almost like you're almost hoping you're on penalty, so you doesn't look as bad that you don't have as many scholarship players. It's like, oh, we can't have 85. We have to have 70.
Wild.
It would. I can't wait to see. It's either going to change college football or it's going to be a dumpster fire. Either way, it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's hilarious looking at the roster. I'm going through here right now, and there's guys that have transferred that I know the names, and I had no idea what they're. Kavasi Smoke, running back from Kentucky, ended up there. Alton McCaskill from Houston ended up there. They just have some fun players that I had no clue were in Colorado are now there. That's now the landing spot for everybody.
It's destination now.
I kind of want to go to a game just to watch.
They play USC in Boulder.
I think
I have
so.
to look it up, but
it is. It's in Boulder.
That'll be a good one. Yeah, I just think it's an interesting conversation about Colorado because you're either all for Colorado being really good or you're all like it's not one or the other. They're not gonna. You don't talk to somebody about Colorado and they'll be like, yeah, I think they'll be a middle of the pack team. I think they'll like be. No, they're either not gonna be very good or they're not gonna be or they're gonna win the whole thing. But let's get to players to watch. I'll go ahead and start with mine just because it kind of goes into the Colorado conversation because I have Travis Hunter down. He was the only player that showed up as 2 times on a Pac-12 all preseason team as a defensive back, and he was as a special teams all-purpose guy is what they did. But Matt, you kind of mentioned it. What is he gonna do? What is he gonna play? I remember I heard an interview with Deion Sanders about like, hey, if he wanted to be a wide receiver, he could be a very good wide receiver in the NFL. If he wanted to be a D-back, he could be a very good D-back in the NFL too. I think Deion might have even said almost as good as me in the NFL is what Deion said. But I think it's going to be really interesting how they use him. It's going to be what he wants to do because, again, the special teams ability is him as well with the returning the football and a lot. There's just so much about him. I want to see how he performs against, as you guys mentioned, this higher level of talent and everything like that. But I definitely think that he's one of those guys to watch because could be a very big guy in this conference.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a wide receiver. I just want to see him play wide receivers. All I think he can do it. I think he's one of those defensive backs that could like legitimately just go play wide receiver and be really good. And not that corner's not important or anything like that. It's just when I watch him play, when they put him in there on third downs or in the red zone to play wide receiver, I'm like, oh, like he just kind of gets it. Like he just kind of gets how to play. It's like, I wish he would play more wide receiver, but it seems like they're going to keep that to be a little bit more limited, at least to start the year.
Yeah, that's what I'm very curious. I think he's listed a wide receiver, but I don't know how much that matters because as we joked about, we don't know what this roster means right now. So it's he's just one of those players I think at Jackson State. I mean, obviously he was a 5-star recruit. If people don't know the story, could have gone basically anywhere, goes to Jackson State and he looked like a 5-star. I mean, when I evaluate, smaller schools, you want to see a player dominate. Like you want to watch them play and be like, hey, this guy does not belong here. He's one of those players. And so it will be fascinating to see how he looks against the USCs and the Washingtons and the Utahs. But he is, I mean, truly just a dynamic player that can do a little bit of everything. Like I don't know that there's a limitation that you could say, but I mean, from a draft standpoint, you will get knocked, it's like, he's positionless. It's like, is he a wide receiver? Is he a corner? Is he a return man? If you haven't seen him do one thing consistently at an elite level, then you're drafting out potential, which someone would do, but it definitely affects your stock.
No, for sure. My player to watch, I'm cheating. This is what I like to do when we do stuff like this. I'm taking the entire UCLA like defensive end room. Obviously I think Latu. I'm probably pronouncing this incorrectly. He was at Washington to start his career, then I believe had to medically retire and then showed back up at UCLA last year, had double-digit sacks, was a lot of fun. But when I was watching him, I also noticed the Murphy twins. So there's Grayson and Gabriel Murphy also on that roster, and both are good. I think I like Grayson a little bit more. It's a little hard to tell. They're number 11 and number 12. They make it very fun to try to tell them apart. But like just the entire UCLA defensive end room, I think these guys are all NFL players. I don't know if any of them are going to be, stud top 50 type picks, but I think they're all going to get to the NFL. They'll probably, hopefully all compete to be drafted. And I just want to see kind of which one of these guys has taken that next step forward. I was a little surprised Latu didn't come out last year. He maybe got, some word back from the NFL saying, hey, go prove that you can be healthy again, because there is obviously the medical concerns, but these guys are all coming back. I'm excited to see what they can do. They're all pretty good, bendy-ish, strong edge rushers. And if you watch some games, I mean, they just completely took over. That UCLA defense was not great when that pass rush wasn't getting home. So when they got stops, it was kind of is on the back of those three guys. So I want to see what they can do this year with another season kind of getting used to and playing with each other. I think that Bruins defense might have to carry the team a little bit more this year, just with all the turnover they had on offense from last season.
Yeah, definitely think so, which is not what you think of when you think of Chip Kelly. It's like, let's hope the defense will step up this year. I love that pick. I'm actually going to go with an offensive lineman, which I know a player to watch, offensive lineman, not normally something you hear, but Jordan Morgan, the offensive tackle from Arizona, is a player to watch. I mean, his mobility in space is fantastic. And I think even for you Chiefs fans, you're watching your offensive tackles have to live in space and have to be able to move around with an agile quarterback. that is exactly what Jordan Morgan does. And he is so fluid. So reasons to watch Arizona might be a little limited this year. But Jordan Morgan has a chance to be one of the better offensive tackles in the country. So maybe not up there with a Ola Fashanu or a Joe Alt, but certainly in that next tier in that conversation. So really, really fun guy if you're an offensive line fan, you probably already know who he is, but definitely someone that I would recommend spending some time getting familiar with.
Love it. All right, we're going to take one more break. We're going to get to our conference winner projections and then some final thoughts coming up right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Back on Barely Bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. We're talking Pac-12 here, and let's get into the conference winner predictions. Matt, let's start with you. Who do you got winning the conference?
Well, much like last year, I'm going to take USC again. I think a year ago there was doubt about could Caleb Williams do it. Could he succeed again after we saw half of a season that first year at Oklahoma? Well, he did it last year. He was amazing. He's now being compared to your guys' quarterback from anybody who talks about football, basically. But the question for USC will be, once again, the defense. We know they will be explosive offensively. They've got a cast of wide receivers that are super, super talented, but can the defense get it done? Last year, they could not. I mean, every game was a shootout. And early in the year, that was fine. They were winning those games. But as soon as they ran into teams that could slow them down just a little bit, they were getting completely stopped. So I think that'll be the key this year is they have, I believe, 6 new starters on defense. So early in the year, the key is going to be for those guys to get on the same page, to develop. Their strong safety, Kalen Bullock, is a star. He will be a very, very early draft pick. There's definitely, some Derwin James to his game. So they should be a team you're going to watch because the offense is amazing. If the defense can come together, if those new additions who are mostly seniors, if they can gel early in the year for that stretch run, then I think we could even see USC be a playoff team.
Yeah, I think USC probably has the nod over these other teams. They have, the most proven, I guess, head coach at this point in time. They have the best quarterback in the country, if, at worst case, tied for the best with the Drake man in North Carolina. And so they should be at the top of the list. I, however, can't put down my Homer roots. We're bringing back out the Huskies. We're getting the Huskies back out here, coming in for Washington last year. A lot of fun. They were my early favorite team to watch last year, especially at night. And then TCU's, close games kind of took over that lead. But I love watching Washington. I love watching Michael Penix. His throwing motion is so much fun to watch. I don't know if it's the best. It's not necessarily the quickest, but it's so aesthetic to watch. Maybe it's just being a lefty with a little bit of a longer release. That's not quite as normal. It looks really nice. And then you throw out that wide receiver room with Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk all came back. It's one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. It's them, Texas, LSU. Those 3 teams are 3 deep at wide receiver. All really good. I think Washington's due for a small step up defensively. I think that's the big thing that held them back. Last year, their defense, especially in the secondary, was just so bad. And that's abnormal for them. They almost always have a quality secondary or a couple players there. And last year, that's where they really lacked. Hopefully they take a step up this year. They also returned Braylon Trice, who might be the best defensive draft prospect coming out of this conference this year. So there's a lot of fun stuff for the Huskies. I just hope they can be a little more consistent than last year because I do think they have the offensive firepower. The one thing working against them, guys, I'm pretty sure they play USC, Utah, and Oregon this year. They play all 3 of the other big teams. I don't know. I don't think they might be the only one. They definitely have a very hard schedule. So that's what's going to work against them. But they'll be battle tested as they take this conference.
Yeah. Battle test is a good way to put it. As you mentioned, Maddie, those top 4 teams, with the USC, Washington, Utah, Oregon, those were the only teams that received first place votes in the media poll. So your theory justifies that of the being a 4-team race. For my conference winner, what I have down is Utah, purely based on the fact that Cam Rising is the USC's kryptonite, and with him coming back, that's what I have it down. Utah, I think they lost a decent amount of guys. I think they were also tied for, or they had the most on the all-conference preseason team. So they've still got some guys. They've got the offensive line working. But I think that just purely based on the fact that they really seemed to have USC's number last year, and I don't know what all is going to change from that. I like Utah. Again, it's one of those teams that wouldn't be shocked if either USC or Washington win it, but Utah was one of those teams last year that you probably would have asked me. I would have been like, it seems like it's USC's conference to lose, and I didn't really think much of Utah. And now I'm very keenly aware of the Cam Rising effect.
And that's such an experienced team. They do a great job of they build from the bottom up. And so you're going to have guys like, it's the anti-Colorado, where you're going to have guys who are there 4 or 5 years. Everyone knows their name. The coaches actually know who they are. They don't have the tape on their helmets, with the last name. At Colorado, they probably have the position and last name with some of those guys. So I think at Utah, it's more of almost like how an NFL team is built and run, because there is so much chemistry and continuity, and they develop their players. So they might not always have the most players on a Pac-12, first team list, or they might not have the most draft prospects, but they're usually just the best football team, which is really what matters.
Yeah.
They're going to drag you into a mud fight. I mean, they're just not going to lose, right? And that's what a Lincoln Riley team, and then, especially you put Lincoln Riley in California and Los Angeles, that is something they don't want to see, right? And Utah did that twice last year. Well, the second time they kind of just blew them out by just running the ball down their throats. Caleb got hurt. It's maybe that played a role, but still, it's just, that's what they do. And teams in the Pac-12 traditionally have, especially lately, haven't been well built to withstand that, right? So that's why they always have a chance. And when you have to go on the road in Utah, you might as well just chalk that up to a loss almost right away. They just don't lose at home. You get in that it's cold, it's in the mountains. They're at home. They always have some kind of dark colored uniforms. They get the black uniforms out. It's
the
just
red numbers that no one can see. It's great. Yeah.
No, it's a very interesting conference. Utah, one of those teams last year, I was like, how do they keep winning? It's they're not the most talented team. You see, USC last year, we talked about stacked top to bottom with talent. You're just like, wow, this is a really good team, but they just they kept the kryptonite. But all right, let's get some final thoughts on this conference. Anyone want to talk about the Cal Golden Bears? We haven't talked about them yet. I don't know if there's anybody.
Stanford.
Right, Stanford. We haven't talked about it. I don't know if there's any teams.
They exist.
Maddie, I don't know if you want to start with anything we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, I'm excited for Arizona State, right? I think Arizona State is a school that historically people think should be better than what they are, because they are in a pretty good spot. You do have a lot of high school talent that has moved out of California for various reasons, and Arizona is starting in the high school level, starting to take a step up. So you're thinking teams like Arizona State and Arizona should be getting a little better. Obviously, the things that, went down with the previous coaching staff, not ideal, kind of put them behind the 8 ball. But Kenny Dillingham's back home. He's back there. He's ready to go. And I really liked what he was able to do with that on offense here, especially with Oregon and stuff. So I'm excited to watch what he can do. I don't think they'll be good this year, but I'm just excited for it. I also want to see is Jaden Rashada play as a true freshman. Did they steal him from Florida, or he got out of going to Florida for whatever reason?
Yeah.
Does he come in and play as a freshman? I'm excited. I want to see them become good. I think they are not in a hotbed of a spot, but I do think they are a team that could definitely be on the rise over the next decade. And he might be the right coach to do it.
Yeah, that's fun. I also want to know how much money he's making this year, Jalen Rashad. Just tell me the number. I want to know. I read the article. I need to know how much money this guy's making, mostly just out of jealousy. This is going to be a fun conference to watch. It does feel like it's kind of predetermined with USC, but as we mentioned, Washington, Utah, Oregon are very, very talented rosters with experienced quarterbacks, experienced head coaches. So it's not just it's just USC. This is a compelling, honestly, it might be the most compelling. I mean, we'll get to the Big Ten, and that's going to be a fist fight. But this feels like it's one where you do have the haves and the have-nots, but those haves are all right there clustered together. So this is going to be a really fun, match to see who's going to win. Maybe the final Pac-12 championship of all time.
Ooh, put your bets in. I think.
Yeah.
I think it will be. I don't think we'll see a Pac-12 after 2024. I'm going to call my shot.
USC's going to take the ball and go home. They're just going to take the ball and just walk away, and the conference just got to call it.
They will.
Right.
No, it's really interesting, a very interesting conference. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Barely Bowl Eligible. Appreciate you guys listening in as we preview the Pac-12, talk about what's going on. But next week we'll be back previewing another conference here as we want to preview a Power 5 conference every week leading up to that Week 0 matchup where we got some bangers on the Week 0 schedule. Navy and Notre Dame, some real good ones that we'll have to preview. So make sure to stick around for that. We really appreciate you guys listening all the way to the end. So until next time, I'm Tucker Franklin for Matt Lane and Matt Miller. We'll see you later.